Jonathan Chait is a writer for New York Magazine, and he's a former senior editor at The New Republic. And he's written for many years about politics, and he's an observer on all things political and sometimes cultural. And I'm delighted he joins us now. Hey, Jonathan, how are you?
Good, thanks.
It's good to have you on. And look, I'm really on Fridays. I like to be flexible, Jonathan. I call them flexible Fridays, okay? Because I think we need to stretch ourselves on a Friday, get ready for the weekend, and just stretch our understanding of things and expand our horizon and our way of thinking. Yeah. So I decided to have you on to ask you about how you think things are going for the country, because you're kind of more of a liberal writer, and you look at things from more of a liberal perspective.
Yeah,
and I think it's important to talk to liberals and find out how they believe all of this is working out. And I'm just looking at polls, and these are not Fox News polls. These are polls from Rasmussen or from AP or Gallup and Washington Post about the views of Americans who believe that this country is in a state of decline, pessimism on the rise, consumer confidence continues to ebb. Given all that, what do you grade President Obama?
What do I grade President Obama? I think he's done a pretty good job. I think he's been a pretty successful president. There are real limitations to what a president can do, to what kind of change you can implement, and it's extremely hard to govern during an economic crisis. Pretty much any leader who takes office when the economy is going off a cliff is going to become unpopular. Given all those constraints, but also given, of course, the fact that he had large majorities for his first 2 years, I think he accomplished quite a bit. Didn't accomplish as much as I would have liked him to have accomplished. I think the primary responsibility lies in Congress and the inability to do that. The administration could have done a better job in some ways, but I think historically it's going to be viewed as a pretty successful presidency.
So none of the things that I said, the fact that America's declining influence around the world, was even expressed by King Abdullah of Jordan 2 days ago in the interview that Lally Weymouth did with him in the Washington Post. He said people aren't looking to the West. They're not looking to America, given the fact that you can turn around and find America on the side of your enemies. The fact that Americans
America's on the side of whose enemies?
I'm quoting King Abdullah's interview with Lally Weymouth, and he cited, of course, the situation with Hosni Mubarak. And he said, look, people are very concerned. They're not necessarily in the Middle East looking to the West for answers because, and he was alluding to leadership that was kind of all over the place. It wasn't clear that if you stuck up for the United States, you were also going to be defended, or at least not immediately thrown under the bus. He was expressing what I think a lot of people have been concerned about, which is America's waning influence in geopolitics.
Right.
Go ahead.
Let's start with that narrow one, and then let's move on to the broader one. You're talking about a fellow autocrat in the Arab world standing in solidarity with another autocrat, and you've got a generation of pro-American, pro-Western autocrats who want the United States to support them regardless of whether they govern well or have any legitimacy among their own people. So, of course, he's going to be unhappy that the United States didn't stand with Hosni Mubarak as his regime crumbled. But I don't think that we should take his word as that of a neutral observer or take his indictment.
Has he been a friend of the United States? Has he been a reliable ally and friend to the United States of America? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, he has. And he's defended American interests in the Middle East consistently. And I think that stands for something. And that actually means something. It means something for Americans. It means something for Christians in the Middle East. It means something for Jews throughout the Middle East. Both Jews and Christians have systematically been either shoved out of their ancestral homelands or terrorized or worse. And so before we celebrate the Arab Spring, I think we also have to see what's coming down the road with the rise of, quote, moderate Islamism to religious minorities who continue to be persecuted as everybody's celebrating the Twitter revolutions.
I don't think our strategy in the Middle East can be based on propping up a series of dictators who have no legitimacy among the public. You can rule at gunpoint for a while, but this is something I think the Bush administration was.
So you think there's going to be more freedom in the Middle East after all of this is done? This is actually going to redound well for religious minorities, other ethnic minorities in the Middle East when this is all said and done. That's your prediction?
Over the long run, yes. Over the long run, propping up autocrats is just not a viable strategy. And over the long run, there was nothing. Hosni Mubarak's an old man. He's ineffectual.
Let's move it off. Let's move it off Hosni Mubarak. My point is a general one. You, as Jonathan Chait, who is known to be, you're a stalwart liberal guy. You think liberalism today and liberal ideals have been strengthened by the governance of Barack Obama? It actually is better for liberals today than it was 2.5 years ago.
Yes, I do.
How do you say that when even today the numbers on Obamacare are plummeting? When the administration itself has to stand back and say, something, we didn't have money for this whole long-term care thing that we thought was going to actually fund a lot of Obamacare. When the country is a majority of the country believes that Obamacare should be overturned. I mean, he promised that, and I think you promised in one of your pieces that history would see the health care bill as a masterfully crafted piece of legislation. Yeah. Masterfully crafted in 800 pages?
Yes, sometimes masterfully crafted things are long. The Bible's pretty long too.
No, so you are not comparing the health care bill to the Bible.
I'm saying the fact that obviously you understand the difference between a comparison and an analogy.
I guess my educational background isn't very strong, so I probably don't get that.
I'm pointing out that the claim that something is long makes it poorly crafted is an illegitimate.
Yeah, just mentioning health care in the Bible is in and of itself hilarious. I'm sorry.
Why don't we pull back on the broad picture and we can zero in on some of these items that you're getting into, because it's a little bit,
Jonathan, Jonathan, the fact of the matter is Obama said 2 years ago, or year and 3/4, whatever, that when people saw the beauty of health care, they saw it in action, they would come around to health care reform. That simply has not happened. Right. In fact, more people are retreating from health care, including the administration itself.
It hasn't taken effect yet either. And that was a huge mistake by the Democrats in Congress. The Democrats in Congress wanted to reduce the total cost of the headline number of the bill. So they decided to phase it in more slowly than they did when they enacted Medicare in 1965. So you've had this vulnerable period where the bill hasn't yet had effect in very.
Well, kids are on their parents' plan, right? I mean, some of my staff is on their parents' plan still.
That's one. There are a couple small parts of it that took effect early.
That's pretty big for all the kids out there. That's a pretty big part of it. A lot of the taxes come later on, though, right?
I don't think there are taxes associated with that provision, but there are taxes. Yeah, there are taxes associated with the bill. Yeah, no, they raise taxes on high-income people. Absolutely. Look, the big picture that I was trying to explain is that the economy started going off a cliff at the end of 2008. And if there's anything that political science research tells us, it's that if you're the leader of a country whose economy is going off a cliff, you are going to become unpopular. That's essentially an iron rule. If the economy is going down, you are going to become unpopular. That's a rule that stands up over time. It's a rule that stands up over countries.
Well, then don't want to become president then. I mean, he knew where we were.
It is a law of gravity.
Right, but he made a series of pledges about his policies that simply have not been borne out by the facts. And I would submit that once again we have to learn the lesson that this top-down, heavy approach to governance, where we pick winners and losers, and the government comes in and says, okay, if we spend a lot of money here, and a lot of this money went overseas because we had to make good on some of these foreign bank interests, then this was all going to turn around, and we were going to have jobs saved or created. And then, like a couple of years later, the president's joking about, well, I guess we don't have those jobs saved or created as I thought. They weren't so shovel-ready. How do you give this a masterful grade?
What you're referring to is an economic prediction that was made in January of 2009, before the administration's economists or private sector economists understood the depths of the recession. So what happened was that the economy contracted by a far greater amount, we now know, at the end of 2008 than they knew at the time. And that unemployment in 2009, at the start of the Obama administration, was already higher than they thought at the time. So they made a projection of what unemployment was going to be without any kind of economic response. And then they made a projection based off of that of what unemployment would be otherwise. But both those numbers were wrong, because the baseline number was wrong. Unemployment was already worse.
So it's the experts' fault?
So to point out and say unemployment ended up being higher than they thought it would be, therefore
did it work? Did the stimulus work? Jonathan, this in the end, I mean, we can say that look, Bush came in, and the economy was kind of in trouble. He had some problems early on, and it's going to be difficult for him, and it was early on. Obviously, 9/11 happened. Oh, that's fine. There's their historical trends. That's fine. I understand that. But in the end, you are judged on your policies, whether they worked or they didn't work in the end, and whether you're a nice guy. People like like their president to be accessible, and they seem like that he understands their views and their problems. Yeah, that's all in the mix. But in the end, you're judged on results, are you not?
Well, you should be. That means two different things. Are you judged on is the country
better off than it was 3 years ago? Yes or no?
On whether your policies actually made things better or worse. I think you should be judged on whether your policies made things better or worse.
You think the country's better off than it was 2.5 years ago?
If you want to judge him on whether things got better or worse, regardless of what your policies contributed to it, then no, he's probably not going to be judged very well. But that's not the right way to judge people.
But do you think more people today would identify themselves as a liberal or progressive because of the policies of President Obama?
No, I don't.
So how has this been good for liberalism, then? I'm a little confused.
Well, what do you mean by good for liberalism? I mean,
is liberalism okay? Let me be very clear. How's it? What do I mean? Well, I think after the first Reagan term, I think you saw a whole new generation. I was one of them, of these new, conservatives. There was a really new movement for conservatism, conservative ideals, conservative writers, conservative commentators. There was really, I think, jump-started a whole new way of thinking about politics. Right. And I would ask you the same thing. So far, at least, do we see that happening with liberalism under the leadership of President Obama? No, I mean,
I don't think so. And that's a phenomenon that's a direct result of what I just mentioned, which is that any leader who's in charge of a country when the economy is contracting or going down is going to become less popular, and that aspect's going to play itself out over.
So he has no control over any. He has no ability to turn that around.
Oh, I didn't say he has no ability. He has some ability, but he doesn't have total ability.
Well, but we understand that because we have a system of government where we have three branches of government, but. But he did say he was going to part the seas and that the sun was going to shine brighter.
He did not say he was going to part the seas.
Well, come on. Even he makes fun of that now. I mean, come on. We all get carried away and say, Do you still hate, by the way, do you still hate President George W. Bush? I'm reading your old piece from 2004, March 15th. That was an awesome piece, by the way. I hate George W. Bush. There, I said it.
Right.
Yeah, I know. I just think, the Bush hatred thing is just, as a conservative, I basically revolted against Bush in the last 2.5 years of his presidency, and I think he almost destroyed the Republican Party, but I don't hate President Obama.
All the conservatives did that, but only in the last 2.5 years of his presidency. Well, the liberals started doing it before Obama ran for re-election.
Right, but I don't have a visceral hatred.
Shoulder to shoulder with Bush through 2004 when he got reelected. And when he was no longer up for reelection, then it was time to throw him overboard.
Okay, that's fine, that's fair. But I just think there must be something you can take to get over that hatred thing. That eats you up. I don't hate the Obamas. I think they're fun.
I do like Mitt Romney. I actually like him as a human being.
Oh, okay. Well, Romney's campaign is over. Chait, I'm just kidding you. Jonathan, it's great to have you on. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Jonathan Chait, writer for New York Magazine, former senior editor at The New Republic.